None of this helps the men in the room on June 22nd. They meet again and again in the weeks that follow. June 28th, another session. The same deadlock. The same careful euphemisms that avoid the cliff edge of truth. The Big Six agree to keep probing Moscow for mediation, even though Ambassador Sato's cables from the Soviet capital crackle with disdain. Unrealistic, he writes in essence. Stalin will demand unconditional surrender. In Tokyo, the foreign ministry keeps sending notes. Hope is a habit that is hard to break, especially when the alternative is unthinkable. While they wait, American B-29s hammer Japan's cities. The geography of suffering spreads across a map. Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, Yokohama. Wooden neighborhoods vanish in hours. Fire leaps from house to house like a living thing. Survivors stumble through ash and cinders searching for water. The emperor asks for damage reports. He studies casualty figures and cereal harvest forecasts, side by side. The arithmetic does not add up to survival. Anami keeps faith with the only strategy he can accept. He speaks of spirit. He speaks of the kamikaze pilots as proof that will can reach where aircraft production cannot. He speaks of soldiers at Okinawa who fought on with nothing in their hands but courage. He speaks softly because shouting would give away how hard he is holding on to this. He does not mention that unacceptable losses is a phrase that has lost its sharpness. The Americans have already accepted so much. Yonai keeps working quietly. He meets with moderates in the bureaucracy, with the imperial household, with anyone who can carry the message inward to the throne and outward into the cabinet. He tells them what he knows without naming it in public. The navy is finished. Oil reserves will not carry the fleet to sea and back again. The kamikaze attacks have been dramatic but insufficient. The submarine war has been lost. There is no path to victory by sea only, the possibility of ending the war before the sea washes over everything. Suzuki, who once survived an assassin's bullets and a younger man's coup, appears frail and moves like an old man, which he is, but he is not weak. He begins to ask a different kind of question in council. What will happen to the Japanese people if we fight the decisive battle and lose? What will happen to the imperial institution if the Americans capture Tokyo? If the army stages a coup to prevent surrender, how many more Japanese will die by other Japanese hands? The questions lodge in the corners of men's minds, where they can't be shrugged off as easily as speeches can. In July, the war deepens. The Allies issue the Potsdam Declaration on July 26th, demanding Japan's unconditional surrender, and promising prompt and utter destruction if the war continues. The Japanese government does not accept. It does not reject. It makusatsu, literally, treat with silent contempt, or more charitably, withhold comment. The word buys time and little else. In Moscow, Stalin keeps smiling while his generals move divisions toward Manchuria. In laboratories across the Pacific, a new weapon hums toward its first use. No one in Tokyo's conference rooms knows this yet. They plan for conventional fire and steel and blood. They cannot plan for what is coming. But to understand the choice that will arrive in August, you have to stay in June a little longer inside that airless room, with the Big Six trapped by their own positions. You have to hear what they refuse to say. Because the silence is part of the story. Silence like a man choosing to speak to the emperor through metaphors rather than admit that the navy is a skeleton. Silence like a commander who believes in will as a weapon because every other weapon has failed. Silence like a prime minister waiting for a divine sovereign who is also a human being to choose which burden to carry, the burden of ordering surrender or the burden of letting his people be destroyed in his name. Through it all, the shadow of Okinawa does not lift. Ushijima's final reports did not argue or plead. They described artillery that falls in sheets, naval guns that plow fields out of hillsides, the grind of advancing units that do not break when shattered but knit themselves back together and press forward again. Caves burned out one by one. That was the fate of an island with prepared defenses, with years to dig and hide and plan. 10 times that scale on Kyushu? 20 times? However many times it takes, there is no steel for that. There is only human flesh. In the palace, Hirohito makes up his mind in stages. He asks his Privy Seal Kido to sound out who might break with tradition when the time comes and accept an imperial decision to surrender. He asks his ministers to consider what will be left to govern after the decisive battle that Anami imagines. He listens to Tōgō outline the reality of Soviet intentions, to Yonai list fuel numbers, to Suzuki weigh the lives of the people against the honor of abstractions. Slowly, a path that has been unthinkable begins to take on a fragile shape. It is not an easy path. If the emperor intervenes, some in the army might revolt. There are officers who have murdered for less. If he doesn't intervene, the decision will never be made, because the men who need to make it cannot. Between paralysis and mutiny lies a narrow walkway, the one the moderates begin to build in whispers after Okinawa. As June fades, the city sweats under a heat that makes tempers fray and papers stick to the skin. Air raids send people into shelters. Families sleep by rivers to escape the possibility of fire that can jump streets in minutes. In the offices of the War Ministry, the plans for Ketsugō thicken trenches, minefields, dispositions, lists of men and women and children who will be told where to stand. In the Navy Ministry, the lists of ships shrink and then stop changing. There is not much left to list. None of the men in the Big Six are caricatures. Anami is not a villain. He is a soldier who believes the thing he has told others to die for must be real. Yonai is not merely a bureaucrat. He is a sailor who once commanded fleets and knows what steel can do and what it cannot. Tōgō is not naive. He is a diplomat triangulating between two forms of disaster. Umezu is not a monster. He is the embodiment of an institution that has confused endurance with victory. Toyoda is not blind. He sees the wreck of the navy and still cannot bring himself to say surrender. Suzuki is not a cipher. He is an old man who understands that the most important decision of his life is the one he cannot make alone. June 22nd is the hinge. After it, you can draw a line to everything that follows. To July's deadly quiet in the council chambers, to the Potsdam Declaration's warning. To August 6th, when a single bomb over Hiroshima does what entire air fleets could not. To August 8th to 9th, when the Soviets invade Manchuria and the second bomb falls on Nagasaki. To the night of August 9th to 10th, when an imperial conference runs into the small hours and the Big Six are still split, 3-3, and the emperor steps into a room where emperors do not step to break the tie. Sacred decision. Seiden. To the last stand of the hardliners on August 14th to 15th, the coup attempt that tries to seize the palace and find the record of the emperor's surrender speech and smash it so it can never be played, men willing to become traitors to prevent what they believe is treason. To the morning of August 15th, when the Jewel Voice broadcast carries the emperor's words to the nation, filtered through formal language, instructing his subjects to endure the unendurable. But you do not get any of that without June 22nd. Without a humid room in the Imperial Palace and a set of men who can see the shape of an ending and cannot say it yet. That is the day when denial and duty collide and neither wins. That is the day when everyone understands and no one admits it. That is the day when the war continues because silence is easier than truth. Okinawa made the stakes impossible to ignore. It was not just the casualty figures or the loss of an island. It was the demonstration of how the Americans would fight on the home island's overwhelming firepower tied to inexhaustible logistics, a machine that does not stop because the men inside it believe stopping is more dangerous than going on. It was the demonstration of how the Japanese army would fight heroically, fatally, without pause until there is nothing left to spend. It was the demonstration of how civilians would die by fire, by hunger, by fear, by orders they could not refuse and rumors they could not outrun. On June 22nd, the Big Six are not choosing between victory and defeat. They are choosing between kinds of defeat. One is swift and survivable. The other is glorious and terminal. One preserves a people and risks an institution's humiliation. The other preserves an abstraction and destroys a nation. They cannot say that yet. But the logic of it fills the room like heat. When you watch their faces in the rare photographs from that summer beige uniforms, tired eyes, you are looking at men who have discovered that reality does not care about their courage. Anami's face holds a stubborn force. Yonai's is composed to the point of emptiness. Tōgō looks older than his years. Suzuki looks as if he could be blown down by a wind that has somehow not arrived. Umezu is stone. Toyoda's expression is unreadable. They are all waiting for someone else to move first. In the end, the emperor moves. But that is another chapter. This one ends here, on June 22nd, 1945, with a sheet of paper on a table and a nation at the edge of a cliff. The messages from Okinawa have stopped. The war has not. The Big Six get up, push in their chairs, and file out into hallways where aides wait with folders that all say the same thing in different words. It is a long walk from that room to the radio broadcast that will tell the Japanese people their emperor has decided to end the war. But the first step is taken today, in silence, under a ceiling fan that barely stirs the heavy air, while the city outside listens for the distant sound of engines and wonders what shape the end will take. Because in that room, on that day, they finally see it. They just can't bring themselves yet to say it.